Welcome to Books in the Freezer, a podcast dedicated to the deliciously disturbing world of horror fiction. I'm your host, Stephanie, and today I'm joined by Sonja, but you might know her as Ghostly Reads on TikTok. So, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It is surreal being here, but I am so excited.
I mean, it was a matter of time. We are like book talk buds.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just a year ago I was doing the cross country trip and your voice was making sure I stayed on the lane, and now being on here is so incredible.
Well, I'm glad you made it across the country safe and that Books in the Freezer was there to keep you company.
It was meant to be.
So, what are we talking about today?
Space horror, which is one of the best subgenres, although I say that about a lot of subgenres, but you really have to work hard to beat this one.
Love it. And I don't know, there's just so much about it that works and that personally terrifies me. I don't know about you.
Like those kids who say that they stare up at the sky or the stars and like vow to be among them one day, never me. Absolutely never me. Just like the thought of the endless black void makes my palms sweaty.
Mine was, I know like my parents bought me like a book all about space when I was in elementary school, and I was flipping through it, and it was like, the sun, here's the lifespan of stars, and stars eventually like burn out and die. The sun is a star, so eventually it too will burn out and die. And I was like just hyperventilating, and then everyone, I don't care if you tell me it's going to be billions of years from now. The thought of that makes me like sick to my stomach, to where I was like, I know, the thought of space freaks me out.
And like who knows? Who knows? Like the sun could do something super weird, an asteroid can hit, an alien can come. There just are so many unknowns that it's something that I approach with extreme caution. Not that I would ever approach it, but it's danger zone.
Absolutely. And I mean, like, what are knowns? You and I have both lived within the timeline where we were taught that Pluto was a planet. That was a known. That was the mnemonic that we used. And now it's like, no, it's not actually. So nothing is known. I have trust issues.
Saturn all of a sudden starts moving. And they're like, yeah, so Saturn has always been an alien spaceship and is flying away. Okay, Pluto used to be a planet. Like, who am I to say what can happen in 10 years from now or tomorrow?
Yeah. I mean, people that know science are like, no, they're like,
That's not how that works.
they're like, that's not even close to how that works. Listening to this podcast. And you're right. The thought of space, like when I see like NASA talk about like, oh, like we're getting this picture here, and this means this, and this is this whole other galaxy. I'm like, I can't. My brain, I feel the cosmic horror of everything implied by that.
Space was made for existential dread, and part of me thinks it was only created to give 5-year-olds like future anxiety. And I'm sorry, no scientist can disprove that to me.
Yeah, it was a purposeful thing. They're like, you know what we need? We need to give 5-year-olds like a little bit of anxiety. So we're just gonna put space here.
Right? Like they have dinosaurs, they're happy with those. We need to put a countermeasure into place.
Oh man. So what about space works with horror?
Absolutely everything, which is why it's such a good subgenre. I love that it's a blend of multiple genres because you kind of need that sci-fi
Mm-hmm.
element. Like even if you're predominantly leaning into like the horror facets, like you need that sci-fi element. But like regardless if you're doing this from kind of like a space opera, hard sci-fi, so kind of like Blind Sight by Peter Watts or, Ship of Fools, there's still the fear of the unknown, there's the fear of darkness, and those are two primal fears. Like I am a 30-year-old woman, but I am scared of the dark and I am scared of the unknown, and space tackles that to the extremes. And it has all of these other subgenres that are involved in it. You can have haunted houses in space, it's
Mm-hmm.
survival horror. Like I get anxious on the subway at 8 a.m. when there's too many people, crowded next to me. Like imagine being in a little tiny tube so far from Earth, and like the claustrophobia that sets in, but there's no escaping it. There's just like everything about it is meant to kill you.
Yes, that's what gets me. Is like I, as a human, am not meant to be in this environment. So we've created, in these stories, all these things. I mean, not in these stories. These are things that actually exist. They're not like those fictional things, rocket ships and stuff. Yeah, like all these things are here to keep me alive in an environment where I am not supposed to survive, and that terrifies me. I mean, same thing with submarines. Just like.
We can get into this whole thing where I'm not convinced that like the deepest part of the ocean is not space. I went on a rant about it the other day. But like in the best case scenario, space is an inhospitable death trap. That's best case scenario. So once you add a creature, an alien, something massively going wrong, your hopes of survival are fragile enough. You don't need this other thing. At that point, just put me in an airlock because I will shoot myself out.
I mean, yeah, there's so much. There's, yeah, just the day to day of just being in space and then blending it with horror. We have, like we talked about, fear of the unknown, sometimes that coming in as an alien life form of some kind.
Which arguably is one of my favorite space type things. But even when there aren't aliens, just this fear, this interacting with something that you can't comprehend, that you don't know. So it could be a small little germ that a scientist has to start poking, and it could have been a neutral thing. But of course, in the wrong circumstances, it becomes something incredibly dangerous and wipes out an entire crew of people, which is just like what my brain can't function in that environment. My brain can't function thinking about that type of environment.
No. And I feel like in these stories, they're always so like, not cavalier because they're very excited about like, oh, we found life on another planet. But no one seems to be like horrified about that at any point until it starts to turn.
Right? Like not even like the slightest bit of
Mm-hmm.
suspicion. Like this is be suspicious.
Yeah, this is be suspicious. Probably that Alien franchise is the one that comes to mind, but also about the evils of capitalism and giant corporations that do not care about the people on board if it means that, they need to be sacrificed for something that could make them money.
Yeah, like the good of the company. And
Mm-hmm.
then, on top of that, space just amplifies the tension. It raises the stakes automatically because one wrong move, a tiny little mistake, could mean disastrous consequences. It could mean death. And then you have somebody who's like, no, 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 no. Like, don't worry about the crack in the spaceship. We'll put duct tape on it. Like, it's fine. Don't worry about the 5 altars we have in Cairo. Like, just, you focus on you. But I do love the aspect of a significant amount of horror, just being like corporations rule the world. Not only is your life fragile in the sense of it can be destroyed by anything, it's also fragile in the fact that these greedy corporations do not care about you.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, they own you. I mean, what are you going to do? You're living on their property. You are their property right now, essentially.
One of my favorite tropes, and I don't necessarily see it in horror too much, is just that idea of just living makes you in debt, like indebted, whatever, to corporations, and just like you have to pay off this debt just because you're alive and they can do that to you, and then your life is pure hell because of it.
It's fun stuff to think about.
Makes me feel really good about the future.
Well, I know in like recent years, and I mean space opera stuff has always kind of, not always, but has existed for a long time. But I know there's been that recent like hope punk.
It's the antithesis of a grimdark, I believe.
Yes, it is. Like the Wayfarer series books. Becky Chambers,
People
yeah.
get into those feel good books, but when I think about it, like, yeah, I absolutely love those books.
I think that helps temper my space anxiety. It's like, okay, but if I live in a world where we've kind of got it figured out, like we're already in the other galaxy, like we interact with all these other species and like intergalactic travels kind of like already been figured out. I'm like, okay, I
The
can live here. Like,
sacrifices have been made.
yeah. Um, like I never got into like Star Trek, but stuff like that where it's like that's already been figured out. This is just how we live now. I can deal with those types of stories. But if it's like modern day, we're like, we're still kind of, this is the first contact. I'm like,
Some ships might go down, but that's kind of like your Monday commute. Traffic sucks. What can you do about it?
yeah. Well, speaking of these stories, there are, I mean, quite a few movies that delve into the space horror category.
And they're all, for the most part, so good. Like, even if they're bad, they're usually bad enough to be good.
Well, we got the big one, I would say, Alien.
Alien.
Love that. I need to rewatch it, but I just have so much fun with it, and it does fall into that category of like, we really should have all just listened to Ripley. She made some good points and everyone was just like hand waving her off when she was like, I think we should, these are the procedures, when this happens we need to quarantine.
Nope. And that happens in Aliens too. Like, she survived this and she's like trying to tell this group of like Marines, like, hey, this is what happened the first time. They're like, nah, don't worry about it. We have guns this time. But it all just goes back to being so blasé about something that is life threatening. And I don't know what's happening in the future. Maybe death is just something that's so common people don't care about it. But I am sorry. If I hear a distress call, I'm not going. I'm not going. And the rule that you have to, it's not cool.
I mean, yeah, that is the setup a lot where it's like, oh, there's a distress call coming from this ship. No one's heard from this ship in 40 years.
Nothing could go wrong.
I mean, I think that leads us into probably the other big one that people think about when they think about space horror.
Event Horizon.
Yup. Where we're going, we don't need eyes. That's not his line delivery style, but we're just going with that. That was Sam Neill's first take.
Yeah. And then he got some direction.
That they were like, let's think about the scene. That's not how that would go.
It is such a good movie. And I love that. So Alien obviously gave rise to that there's a distress signal. We have to go check it out.
Mm-hmm.
Event Horizon kind of gave rise to like the haunted house in space trope that a lot of recent modern books and movies are.
Yes. Yeah, I've seen that. So I've seen that, yeah, as a big comp. It's like, and this is like Event Horizon, where it's like, this is a ghost ship, and like, ooh, no one's heard from the crew in 40 years. It just kind of went dark. Ooh, nothing can go wrong. We're definitely just gonna like hop on board and check out what happened and just come back on this ship unscathed.
Sounds right. Yeah. And then it's so funny because like in the 80s when like Rosemary's Baby came out, like everybody was rushing to be like, it's Rosemary's Baby meets the Pet Cemetery. It's Rosemary's Baby meets Martha Stewart. Now it kind of seems like everything is blank meets Event Horizon, but to be honest, I'm not mad about it.
Yeah, I mean, it was like the thrillers of the 2010s. Everything was Gone Girl. Like every like unreliable female narrator was like, this is Gone Girl meets this.
Just slap it on. Just slap her name on it. It'll sell.
Yeah, I mean, Event Horizon, yeah, has the haunted house thing, but then, oh, the turn that it takes at the end when like supernatural stuff starts coming up, and just the set design, the body horror design, just everything is just like,
The body in that, I'm a body horror girly, it's minimal, but it's so effective. And that one short little scene when they, you know, reconstruct the message is so just like horrifying and intense. And just there's nowhere to run. You know what I mean? Like they see that they're experiencing these weird hallucinations. They don't know what reality is. And then to see what happened to that crew and realize there's nowhere to go, like that, my brain would fracture.
yeah, no.
I get anxiety having like a second cup of coffee. I'm not meant to exist in those dire situations.
No, absolutely not. It's like, I mean, I'll talk about this in like a later story, but like in the story of The Martian, where like Matt Damon's character is like, yeah, like kind of as an astronaut, you're kind of told like everything up there is a big deal. Like mistakes and everything is life or death. And you're kind of taught how to like calm down and like see if you can find a solution. And I'm like, I am not built that way. I am all panic, no
Do not
disco.
have solutions with me. When I watched The Martian, a friend brought me to see it, and I thought it was going to be a horror alien movie. So I'm sitting there for the entire movie, just like
Where's
waiting
the
for the
Martians?
build up. When it ended, I was thoroughly confused.
I'm like, but where are the Martians? Why so many poop potatoes? Where are the Martians?
And like another, I don't know, I think like a specific pocket of people might know this, but Event Horizon is also like the unofficial prequel to Warhammer 4K, which is like a dark futuristic tabletop game where
Mm-hmm.
you're essentially going to war with somebody. And I didn't include the books, but they are a surprisingly really good series that definitely fit into the space horror genre. And I think they're a little bit underrated because they are tied to a game.
That is cool. I mean, I've heard that. I did not know that those properties were tied.
I think it's unofficial, but I
Yeah.
know,
Like an unofficial inspiration type deal.
yeah, but definitely. So I think Event Horizon was inspired by The Shining. I want to say The Haunting, and I think there was a throwaway mention that Warhammer was also a little bit of an inspiration.
Oh, interesting. I was thinking also like Life, that Jake Gyllenhaal movie that came out, and Prometheus are kind of similar in that we're like the motivation is like scientific discovery. Like we are on this voyage and we're gonna be like the first ones to make this really big discovery and like what could go wrong? We've got it. Don't worry about it.
No, 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 I'm good. It's fine. It's poking it with a stick. Nothing's gonna go wrong. I do not understand people who sign themselves up to be first contact folks. You guys can
Mm-mm.
have it. You're on your own. And it's just I don't like it's all these super qualified people, years of training, years of school, and when they have this like bright, shiny object, and I think it is kind of human nature, like all of that training just goes away, and they're like a cute little, they're seeing a cute little puppy, like I want to touch it, and then all hell breaks loose.
No, I mean, there is just the need to be the first one to have your name attached to this discovery. Like, what if, we call this like discovery like the Sonja discovery? That's going to drive you to be.
It doesn't need to happen.
You're like, no, actually not. It's not a big motivator for me. Well, like in life, when they're like live streaming from space to like that elementary school class, and they're like, oh, we're going to do a poll. What should we name this new like alien little amoeba thing that we found? Oh, Calvin? Is that what they end up
Yeah,
calling
I
it?
don't
Something
think
like
so.
that. And I'm like, Calvin, maybe don't underestimate Calvin.
So yeah, leave him in the room, like let him just be Calvin in a corner, and you don't have to let him touch your flesh. But of course, people are so driven by the need of having a legacy that they will risk everything, and they're part of it's them not realizing that by pushing these boundaries, you're literally risking the survival of mankind, but it's a sacrifice worth making to make sure your name goes in the history books, if there is one.
It's wild. You have Here Sunshine. I've never seen that.
Okay, some people might come at me because I know there is a subset, a large subset that will say it's purely thriller. But it scared me. I put it on as a movie just to kind of fall asleep to. I haven't seen it before. And by the end, I was sitting up in my bed with the covers like to my mouth. And yes, it was thrilling, but my heart was pounding. I don't want to give it away. It's not necessarily a creature feature, but it's kind of more of a realistic horror movie that describes how terrifying, bleak space is.
I'm going to have to check it out.
Yeah, it's all about like the sun is burning out
Oh no,
and
no, I'm already like,
humanity
no.
stands
This
out.
is this is my first big fear, Sonia.
Right? Like that's a terrifying concept, and a crew is flying out there to try to reignite it. And
What?
it's like
What what?
who like yeah, let's just bring a lighter. Just bring a really big lighter. Go make that ball on fire again. but it's psychologically so messed up, and that's part of what I love about space horror too, is you don't necessarily need an alien or a creature. Your own mind becomes the entity, and mass hysteria, mass paranoia can easily undo and unravel a crew just as easily as a xenomorph can.
Oh, absolutely. Speaking of, I don't think either of us picked any of the Alien novels, and also the exciting news that V. Castro.
Yes, I wanted to bring that up. I
Yeah.
think her book, the Vasquez book, I think it's coming out October 25th. Don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure. I love, okay, I don't love all of the Alien books, but I love most of them.
Hmm.
And I was going back and forth if I should include them on my list, but I decided an honorable mention was enough.
Yeah, I know previous guest Jess would be remiss if they did not at least get a mention in this episode about space horror. So yeah, that is definitely one to look out for, and one that, even though I haven't read any of the other Alien books, I'm gonna check out because V. Castro. So of course.
You can do no wrong with Castro, and
And I
arguably
mean, I love Vasquez is a fascinating character.
the best character, other than Ellen Ripley, of course,
I'm
but
like,
she
well,
was like the best character in Alien.
I mean, definitely the most memorable. We love a sassy Latina.
We absolutely do, and I think like we don't have enough women in space horror, which I kind of talk about when we get to my books. So like choosing like a really powerful, sassy, witty character, I'm like salivating for that book.
Yeah, I am very excited for it. All right, well, should we talk about some books?
That's why we're here.
This episode is brought to you by Fangoria, the world's best horror and cult film magazine since 1979. Listeners can use code BOOKSINTHEFreezer to get 20% off their order. That includes, of course, merchandise and first-time subscriptions and single issues of the magazine. Not only are there tons of articles and interviews about upcoming horror movies, there's a regular segment by Stephen Graham Jones all about slashers called Slasher Nation, so you're going to want a copy. So again, that is code BOOKSINTHEFreezer, and thank you, Fangoria, for supporting the show. All right, I will start off with a graphic novel. It is Southern Cross by Becky Cloonan, and I think illustrated by Andrew Bellinger. And here we are again. This is if you want a good Event Horizon read-alike. But there are just certain elements where I'm like, but I mean, this is that. If there's like certain feelings that I feel like even other books that I have read where it's like, this is like Event Horizon. I'm like, no, but this really is though. So this woman, Alex, is tracing her sister's steps to the refinery moon to collect her remains and just hopefully find some answers regarding her sister's passing. It was very sudden. She had like a weird relationship with her sister, but there's just something that feels off about it. So she's on this ship, and she's running into people, and there's just people know more than they're letting on, and she doesn't know who to believe and who to trust. So it's kind of got a bit of a locked room mystery, because I mean, all of like space stuff is basically one big locked room vessel.
Yeah, I was gonna say a big component to a lot of movies and a lot of books is like that one character or like that subsection of characters who are like, yeah, that's totally the mission objective as they're hiding nuclear warheads or like a cage to catch whatever creature that they're after.
Yeah, so it was just a very good blend of sci-fi, murder mystery, and horror. And yeah, I'll just say the type of horror, very final act of Event Horizon. Like I was like, yes, feeling this, here for it. I would say I'm putting this in the fridge. There was some creepy imagery as it gets to the end, and you kind of get a hint of what's going on. These are available on Hoopla. If your library has Hoopla, you can just download them for free. I think it's like 2 volumes, like volumes like 1 through 7, and then like 8 through 12. But I just absolutely loved these, and I think especially if you're a little burnt out on like a normal sci-fi narrative, just having something that's like in a different format and just like kind of colorful and interesting and coming at it from a new way was really fun. So I really liked this. So that is Southern Cross by Becky Cloonan and Andrew Bellinger.
My goal this year was to get into graphic novels, and it's almost October, and I haven't read one yet. So maybe that will be.
Hoopla is great, I would say, for graphic novels. That's where I read a lot of them. And you just like download them and you can kind of like double tap on a panel and it zooms it up if you're having like a hard time reading like a whole panel on a little screen.
I need that these days.
Yeah, we're getting old.
It happens. Gonna
Hey.
do it gracefully. So my first pick is an anthology, Midnight Beyond the Stars, and it's edited by Kenneth V. I want to say Kane. I really hope I'm pronouncing names right. And this is a good sampler. That's mainly why I picked it. It's like a little charcuterie board where you get a taste of different elements that make up space horror. So we get a variety of different aliens. Some are comical, some are more serious and scary. Some stories take place on Earth, some take place in space. We have cosmic elements, we have isolation, we have existential dread. So if you want to dip your feet into the genre, it's a really good place to start. And it has so many incredible authors. Christopher Triana, Samantha Kolesnik, they wrote Earthbound stories, so I'm not going to highlight those. But one of my favorite was Embryo by Tim Curran. And it's such a dread-inducing story that makes you feel powerless and completely insignificant. And I guess it has an event horizon elements in the fact that it's a haunted house in space. It's done very differently, but we're dealing with a haunted planet instead.
Oh.
But there is that element of ships have gone there and disappeared, and there's like this urban legend facet to it. And we see the crew succumb to a mass paranoia that's not unjustified. And there's this really creepy, inescapable presence that like really drives home that there is nowhere to run in space. This isn't a haunted house on Earth where you can kind of make it out. And side note, I don't know, there's a scene where a character has the audio of the planet playing in the hull. And I'm not sure if you've ever thought to look up the sounds made by planets.
No, see, this is like what I mean, Sonia. Like every time NASA's like, we found something exciting, I just like, I can't handle it. I'm like,
Tune it
no,
out.
no.
Yeah, tune it out.
But please go on.
I don't know what's wrong with me, but like instead of playing like calming nature sounds when I'm going to
No.
bed, I'll put on like, let's listen to some space sounds. And then I'm lying there with like saucer eyes, being filled with existential dread, comparable to nothing that I've ever felt. Saturn in particular is the most terrifying sound. You should look it up when we're done. And another story is Scan for Life by Jason Parent. And that's just kind of like a countdown to death type story. So
Huh.
there was an explosion. This one crew member survived, but their oxygen is depleting and they only have like, I think a minute, maybe less to survive. So they're floating around a planet, completely helpless. Waiting for their oxygen to run out. But then they start noticing something odd about the planet, and they realize that maybe suffocating wouldn't have been such a bad death after all.
Oh no.
And I like this story because it goes into my like rationale of leave whatever is in space alone. Whatever is out there, let it be. We don't need to go waking things up. I know that anthologies can be hit or miss, but I think for the majority, these stories are fairly solid. I had a really good time with most of them.
Interesting. I did see this and I was looking at that too.
It has a lot of really, I was surprised by how many authors, known authors, were in it. And it's just so fun seeing their takes on space horror because for a lot of them, it's not in their wheelhouse, really.
Mm-hmm. It's something I've seen an uptick more recently. Have you noticed that? Like, I feel like a few years ago, I wanted to do space horror, and I was like really struggling
Oh, absolutely.
to find stuff. And like, I feel like in the recent years, we've seen the like you were saying, the Event Horizon read alikes.
It's not a bad
No,
trend.
I'm not complaining.
And especially with NASA doing what NASA does, like I think we're going to start, unfortunately, having really weird encounters that's probably going to spur a wave of more, and I am desperately waiting for it.
Yeah. And if people are wondering why we're not like talking about any like extraterrestrial stuff, again, I can't handle it. I don't know how to put it to you. Like, I will not look into this because my anxiety cannot take it. It's
I
just
love aliens. The dark forest theory will keep me awake for days if I think about it too much. But there's so much on Earth. Like there's bears, there are sharks. They're scary enough. Like why do we have to include something that could snuff us out so easily if they wanted to?
seriously. On that note, moving on to my next pick, which is The Luminous Dead by Caitlin Starling. And if you want a book that is just claustrophobia, I would say here you go. This is Claustrophobia, the novel. So this is about a woman named Gyre who takes a job where she will be exploring a cave by herself. And I really like the beginning of this book where when we get her motivation that she lies about her qualifications to get this job. This is kind of her only chance to get off this planet. And we do have the like prep for the mission. Like she gets her fitted suit with all the like doodads and stuff. And I'm like, this is cool. I like reading about all this stuff. But then we get to where she actually is in the cave, and essentially the only contact she has is through her suit to another woman named M, who is kind of giving her directives, and they have a tense relationship to start off. They do not get off on the right foot, and that intensifies as Gyre doesn't know if M is being honest with her about, like you were saying, what is the nature of this mission? Are you being honest that I really am one of the first people to be here? Because I see things that lead me to believe that that might not be the case. So what am I supposed to do with this evidence of things that I am seeing? And you're just kind of hand waving it away.
Is that a pair of Nikes? Like,
It's like,
no, no, no,
sorry
no.
about no, you're not saying that. I mean, but also M has like full control of her suit, so she will like inject her with stuff and just put her to sleep. She's like, this is a gross violation of my bodily autonomy, but it's like, you belong to the corporation and you're here to do this mission. So if that's what needs to be done, it's what needs to be done. Which again is terrifying to be stuck somewhere you don't know, wearing this suit where someone else has control of like what you do.
And it's
There's
somebody that you can't even trust.
Yeah, that you've never seen, that, yeah, you don't trust. That is the only contact you have. And are you alone in this cave, despite what she is saying? Are you?
Again, like the claustro, I can't handle being on a subway, but imagine like pushing yourself through a cave system and just noticing that unsettling feeling that jolts to the back of your brain that something is wrong, and that primal, like animalistic need to run away, but being completely unable to
mm-mm.
is heart attack central, right?
Yeah, absolutely not. Like, I kind of want this to be a movie because then it would rival like The Descent for me. The Descent is like my all time, like my number one spot for me. But this would be up there because we're kind of dealing with similar
If
things.
done correctly, because I mean the book too, when you hear about the book, it doesn't sound like a lot can be done with the narrative, but it is packed full of a lot of really good writing for basically being communication between two people.
Yeah, I mean, if we pitch this like thing, it is a one kind of two-person novel. That is it.
Yeah.
And so for that reason, I am putting it in the fridge. This one, I would say there probably are parts of it that went on a little too long for me. Like I feel like it could have been slimmed down a bit to keep the tension high. But overall, it was very enjoyable and a book that, I mean, I still think about to this day. And I read it several years ago. So that is The Luminous Dead by Caitlin Starling.
That is a goodie. My next pick is The Last Astronaut by David Wellington. A large alien object is heading towards Earth, and a not quite disgraced astronaut is picked to lead a team to make first contact, which you should never do. The problem is that corporations have pretty much taken over, and NASA is all but defunct. The Sally Jennings is their last astronaut. They have no money, and her crew is a mishmash of qualified but woefully unprepared individuals. They've never been to space. They really don't know what to do to survive in that atmosphere. And as you imagine, things go horribly wrong for all of them. It's very fast paced and it mixes first contact, aliens, and survival horror. So we do have some aliens in this one.
Ooh.
I listened to the audiobook, which is somewhat rare for me, but it works. There's this mix of like regular narration, video vlogs, and kind of like voice confessions, and it's all mixed together in a way that is so cinematic that it pulls you right there in with them. Tensions are high, the groups start to turn on each other as their paranoia grows, things start to get pretty violent, and hidden motives start coming to the surface as they're exploring this alien ship and realizing there is something here and it's dangerous. Plus, there is a good amount, not too much, but a good amount of body horror, which is so good when it comes to space horror, because what better way to show us how weak our fragile little bodies are than by completely obliterating them. So I won't say that this book goes too far into graphic detail, but it did kind of give me the ruins vibes at certain points, which I was not angry about. And I love that it focuses on the enormity of space, how difficult it is to survive just because you are out on a spaceship and you don't need something lurking in the darkness to kill you necessarily, although there is that in this book. Something as simple as the batteries on your spacesuit running out could be the end of you.
Oh
So
my
like
gosh.
when you look down, like there's a like you look down and your phone has 25%, like that's an inconvenience. But imagine like looking down, you are stuck in this alien ship, no way that you know to get out, and you're running out of oxygen. I am not built to survive stressful situations like that. I would find a cliff in that ship and like yeet myself off.
Yeah.
And I also really appreciate that Sally Jansen, one of the POV characters, she's a woman in her 40s or maybe 50s, and she's not like an Ariana Grande substitute. You know, when we see those very young 19-year-olds, 20-year-olds in like little lab coat, that's not what this book is about. This woman is older, she's tired, and her body hurts, and I just really appreciated that.
Yeah. We need more of that.
We really do need that. Give me a hero whose knees creak when they stand up. I will read everything about their lives. I would probably put it at room temperature. It's not the scariest book that you are going to read. It is very unsettling, and it makes you realize that as prepared as the government, as the world, as trained individuals think that they are, when you confront the unknown, you realistically have no way of fighting it. First, you have to learn all you can about it. You have to have something that could get through its defenses, but often than not, you are starting from a significant disadvantage, and you have to try to make that work. And sometimes you can't. This is The Last Astronaut by David Wellington.
Mm.
And I do encourage the audiobook.
We'll make a note of that. That sounds really interesting. Okay, for my final pick, I was kind of torn between two books. I was going to do The Gone World by Tom Sweterlich. I read it several years ago, though, and I remember it being a very complicated book, and I was not confident in my ability to rehash like plot points and be able to talk about it at length. But I will say, I remember absolutely loving it. It's pitched as kind of True Detective, in kind of True Detective with time travel.
I could see that.
Yeah, so it's like this woman who is set to investigate is it a Navy SEAL who has murdered his family? The murder of a Navy SEAL's family, and like their missing teen daughter, and she has to like go back in time to like, which again hurts my brain to think about. It's like explained a lot better in the book, but like how she's going back and like finding all this stuff. And then there is a space element that I think they lean into more into the third act. But that's really as deep as I can go, because I read it so long ago, and even then I was like, this is complex.
I read it recently, and I haven't made a video about it because I don't know how to talk about it. It's very good.
Yeah. So instead, I wanted to give it a mention though, because if you are looking for like sci-fi, like mystery with like, I don't know, God, there's just so much stuff going on. It's kind of like cosmic time travel, like procedural, like it's got kind of all these things going for it. I definitely wanted to give it a mention. But I'm going a very different direction with my final pick, and I'm doing the short story collection The Illustrated Man by Ray Bradbury. I love Ray Bradbury. And one of the stories is Kaleidoscope. And this is about a rocket that just kind of explodes, and everyone on board, has their spacesuits on, but they're all just kind of launched into different directions. Here's the quote. They fell as pebbles fall down wells. They scattered as jackstones are scattered from a gigantic throw. And now, instead of men, there were only voices, all kinds of voices, disembodied and impassioned in varying degrees of terror and resignation. And it's just like this crew, they all have been thrust, and they are all basically like being launched in different directions. They can still communicate with each other, but they are getting like further and further away. And there's like a note that their communication is interrupted because one of them is just screaming and taking up the channel as he is being launched, until his screams just like die out as he's too far away. And what is scary about this is that this is not told as a horror story. Like the way this is told is very like contemplative, and we're following this man who's kind of like dealing with like his own mortality, and kind of like, what did my life mean? Like now that I'm kind of here, and like I kind of hope my life means something. But everything about this made my palms sweat. I was like, oh.
Literally like writhing in my seat.
Yeah, like they're joking with each other, and they're like, oh, where are you headed? And he's like, well, it looks like I'm gonna hit this like meteor belt, so we'll see how long I have. Well, it looks like I'm gonna hit Earth, so I'm probably just gonna burn up on impact. Like, and I'm like like crying listening to this, and it's told in this very removed, like matter-of-fact way, and I'm like, oh my God, I can't.
And the thing with like spacesuits and, sometimes movies go into like, we have the best armor in the world, but when it comes to space, like no matter like what suits they have, no matter what their ships are fitted with, it really feels like those flimsy seatbelt you get on roller coasters where it's like,
Mhm.
well, good luck, and like a little pat on the shoulder, like we
Yeah, as
think
like
you'll
some
survive.
Distracted 16-year-old like about to go on lunch is like, you're fine. Click. Then there was another story called The Long Rain, and it's about these astronauts who are on Venus, and on Venus, it never stops raining. And so they are kind of slowly being driven mad. And they are on the lookout for a sun dome, because I guess the first time we landed in Venus in the story, we did put like sun domes and dry spots everywhere. The species that lives on Venus like went out and destroyed all of them, but supposedly there is one still standing. And so this crew is out looking for them, but just the constant barrage of rain, and as they're getting like more weathered and weathered, like, they start like hallucinating. People just start like thinking they see something and like running off into the distance. And it's just like one by one, the crew just starts thinning out, as this is just finally getting to them. Then there was one story called No Particular Night or Morning, where it's like two astronauts, and one just really starts like delving into the like solipsism, where he just kind of like doubts that anything is real. Like, I wrote this story and my name was there, but what if it wasn't me? What if the memory I have of writing that story wasn't real? And it just gets to him, and you're just like, what are you doing? As he's just like, nothing is real. And the guy's like, but I'm here, and you can see me. And he's like, but what if you're not?
That is a trip. But it does make me think, like when humans, how they have those rooms where there's like no noise
Oh,
and
sensory
like, yeah,
deprivation
so like you're put
chambers.
into those, and I think everybody pretty much freaks out at different like time frames. But like those make me think that humans are not made, not adapted to go into these weird isolated situations where we can't figure things out because our brain takes over in very bad ways, not even ways that help us survive sometimes.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Yeah, those were like, I think the creepier stories. I think with Ray Bradbury, you're going to have like a, a variety, and like the Rocket Man story was in this one, which is the basis for the song Rocket Man. I don't know if cute's the right word, but that's like a quieter, more domestic story about like a mother and son, and like the dad goes off into space for like 3 months at a time and just like comes back, and just like how they deal with the reality of having him like gone and then come back and then gone and come back. And it's just like a bit more of like an emotional, like sad story. So you're gonna have those like just like the quietly sad ones. Like there's a story, it's called like, I think it's called like The Night Before the End of the World, where it's just like this couple and they're like putting their kids to bed, and they just kind of know like the world's gonna end.
Oh, I need to read that. That like
Yeah, like I'm
reminds me of that couple in Titanic who's just
Oh
like
my gosh, that kills me. Like it's just one of the, like that movie. That's the scene where I start bawling, where they're just laying on the bed, like holding hands. Yeah, like immediate tears. Or the mom reading her kids like bedtime, or like telling her kids bed. I'm crying now. I'm literally crying now.
oh man, the emotions in that is I want to say it's like such a simple thing that like draws out the biggest emotions, but I mean I don't have kids, but like I took my dog to sleep, so imagine like a child
yeah.
in that. No, no, thank you. But I'm
Oof.
absolutely going to read it and sob.
Yeah,
Maybe tonight.
I love the style of these stories, and the that mid-century sci-fi literary style, is very Twilight Zone esque. And there are like a few stories where it has that like ooh like Twilight Zone twist at the end. And I know he did write like a Twilight Zone episode or two. I love the Twilight Zone.
But if
If
you
you
like
don't,
me,
then I can't trust you as a person.
I love it so much. I always go back to it and just
That is a first date question. Do you like the Twilight Zone? Nope. Okay, have fun. I will pay for the dinner.
so yeah, I would recommend that. I thought it was like a solid collection. So that is The Illustrated Man by Ray Bradbury.
My last choice, I was also debating between The Mind is a Terrible Thing by Haley Piper and Dead Silence by S.A. Barnes. And I did opt for Dead Silence, but I did want to throw out Haley Piper because it is a very good cosmic horror. And instead of people following the signal, they're just people existing in space and the bad thing comes to them. So that's like the next step in the evolution of our space travels where we're minding our own business and bad things come our way anyway. But for Dead Silence by S.A. Barnes and talking about the Titanic, a repair team discover a outdated distress signal on the edges of space, which like already abort mission. There's this long debate about how they have to respond because that's just space law. It seems to be common space law throughout a multitude of movies and books. And ultimately, they decide to follow it, not because they're good people, but because they're thinking about fame and fortune that could come with it. And the signal goes to the Aurora, which is a lost luxury space liner a la the Titanic.
Mhm.
And they decide to go on board and claim it as salvage so they can be wealthy for the rest of their days, but they don't really realize that they are stumbling into a gigantic nightmare. I believe this was Barnes' first time writing true horror, and you really get this sense of her playing in the sandbox of horror tropes and having fun, which made me have fun as a reader. I had a really, really good time with this one. Is it something that's going to keep you up at night? Probably not. But the tropes that she uses are simple and effective enough that it kind of brought me back to being a little girl, scared to check under my bed for a noise I could have heard. And that's not a easy thing to achieve, especially with your first book. And it also plays on one of my favorite tropes, which is going into a situation where there are signs of civilization, but not a trace of a person can be found. So there, are discarded plates everywhere. There is signs of somebody being here recently, but they are poof, just gone because it sparks this primal fear. And it's this gigantic mystery of what did this, is this still here, and am I going to be next? And I really think that Barnes used visuals incredibly well. There are, before the gravity is turned back on, there are sheets floating down corridors, and that's mixed with footsteps that shouldn't be there, with traditional horror tropes of seeing something from the in your peripheral, and then you turn around and it's no longer there. And I thought it was just such a fun callback to horror as a genre. And people are a little bit on the fence about this one because they wish that it leaned more into horror, or like the scary aspects of horror. But I think she did such a good job of walking a balance. Plus, her influences were the Titanic, Ghost Ship, which I think is a must watch, and Aliens, obviously. So to take all of those and make something that doesn't necessarily feel new, but refreshing it in the sense of putting it in space, kind of like Jason X. Uh, I just think it was a really good time, and I think people will have a really good time reading it.
I agree. I enjoyed this one. And yeah, I was waiting for you to mention Ghost Ship because it just has that like we're going on to this like used to be a luxury cruise liner, but like, there's evidence of people being here, but where are they? And when they find them, yikes. They when they do, it's a lot.
It is, and it's just there. There's this. Your brain just fights what's happening without giving anything away for dead silence. At one point they're looking at like dismembered human body parts, but they're like frozen in space
Like
time
floating.
and like floating, and you're like dodging. It's just such a good twist on haunted houses, on like the mysterious nature that comes with getting to the bottom of, what happened to these people. I was I was surprised by how much I enjoyed this one.
I agree. It was a fun time. Yeah, and it's also got the like this was, a floating space hotel, so you have the kind of the like hotel tropes of like people staying in rooms and are those rooms empty and what's going on here.
Absolutely. And the weird phantoms, like, are we really seeing phantoms? Are we succumbing to something in the air? Are we hallucinating what's real, what's not real? Because at one point the characters do start to question their reality, which makes sense when you are stuck in a floating shell on the edges of civilization. Your mind is going to not be your ally necessarily. So having to figure out what's going on when your mind is the thing that's dragging you down is not something that I want to experience in my lifetime.
Nope. That's a big nope from me too. So what would you rate this?
I would say it's in the fridge. And I know people will fight me on that, but I think there's enough of those classic horror tropes, those elements that just brought me back to being a little kid and being scared of simple things. And maybe I just dived into that feeling because I just loved that she got these emotions out of me. But it's not going to keep you up at night, but I think you will have the chills. And that is Dead Silence by S.A. Barnes.
This episode is brought to you by Libro FM. Libro FM is the first and only company which lets you purchase audiobooks directly from your favorite local bookstore. You can pick from more than 150,000 audiobooks, including bestsellers and recommendations from booksellers. You'll get the same audiobooks at the same price as the largest audiobook company out there. You know the name. But you'll be part of a different story, one that supports community. If you're new to audiobooks, they're the perfect way to get more books into your busy life. Listen during your commute, while doing chores, walking the dog, or just relaxing at home. All you need is a smartphone and the free Libro FM app. If you already love audiobooks and don't know what to listen to next, check out recommendations and curated lists from people who know audiobooks best. Booksellers. And us. We also have a playlist on there full of books that have been recommended on this podcast. Books in the Freezer special offer. You get 2 audiobooks for the price of one, just $14.99, with your first month of membership using code FreezerBook. This offer is valid for new members in Canada and the United States. Thank you, Libro FM, for supporting the show. Well, one of the traditions we have on this podcast is to ask guests what their final girl song would be.
My final girl song is Ain't Gonna Drown in the River by Elle King.
Ooh, what are the vibes? What are we working with?
It is a very I'm accepting my fate. I don't care if the devil is going to drag me down. I am dragging myself back out, and I don't care if I'm corrupted. This is just who I am now. And I very much vibe with that.
I love that. I will add it to the list. Then our last tradition, of course, is to ask us for a chilling obsession. So, what is something you've been enjoying in horror lately?
Other than reading, I am massively obsessed with playing horror games. And right now, I was a little bit late. I am fully immersed in The Quarry by Supermassive Games. They are the same company that put out Until Dawn for Until Dawn fans. I absolutely love and hate these high stakes games where a tiny minute choice will completely derail everything and kill everybody that you love. I love giving myself that anxiety.
That is funny. I love that. It is just is funny because I think you and I are both anxiety girlies and we're both just so into horror. And I know a lot of people cannot wrap their minds around it, but we get it.
I was talking about it with a friend yesterday, and I feel like it gives me like the adrenaline boost and the serotonin spike that I need to just like rush through my week. And then I'm depleted and I'm tired. So I need to like add that back by like scaring the crap out of myself. And then, okay, I have enough energy to get through the next week. And it's you're riding off of waves of fear. That's how I live my life.
Nice. I don't know. A lot of mine is like exposure therapy. Oh my gosh. For me, it's the Final Destination movies because I literally do live my life like scared of like everything just killing me. So watching a franchise that is just based on like one wrong move and something out there is just like gonna get you in some weird Rube Goldbergian way. But they do. I do like work through all my anxiety just watching them and I'm like, you know what? I can handle it now. I feel
Right?
at peace. Thank you.
And I just watched it, so it can't happen. Like a month needs to pass before it happens to me.
Yeah. Well, I think it also helps that they are so ridiculous that I'm like, okay, so it probably wouldn't happen like that. So I'd be
I
safe.
still will not put my hand down a garbage disposal ever. And I will still not ever be behind a truck carrying logs.
Mm-mm.
I
I
will
think,
go out of my way to not do both.
yeah, I think a whole generation of us knows not to do that. Also, the descent. Don't drive behind logging trucks. But my chilling obsession is I finally saw Nope.
I have to watch that still.
It was very good. I rented it video on demand because my husband was out of town and I got to enjoy it on the big TV downstairs by myself.
Such a good feeling.
Yeah. And okay, so I think my Jordan Peele ranking is still Get Out up top, but then Nope, and then Us.
Oh, that's interesting.
I really liked it. I think it fits. It's kind of a blend of a lot of things. It's weirdly like a horror sci-fi western. Like it's got just a lot going on. And it's a movie I would say go in blind. I watched it and I was so glad I didn't watch any trailers.
Yes,
Like
so
I
far
was
I
so
have been
glad.
good at
Yeah,
not watching.
don't do it. Like go into it just as blind as you can. And it was just such a great experience. There was just certain scenes where I was like, am I seeing what I'm seeing right now? Is this what is happening? And just visual things where I was like, oh my God. So I had a fun time with that. Also, I'll do another mini chilling obsession, but Shudder has been releasing the 101 scariest movie moments and doing it as a weekly countdown. Did you ever watch that? Like, I think it was on Bravo, like couple decades ago, so like the 90s or the 2000s, but they did like a count, like a horror movie countdown of like the scariest moments and had like talking heads. But it's so this is like the updated Shutter version of that, you know, where we're hearing from like Mike Flanagan and Tanana Reeve Dew and like actors from movies coming in and saying like, yeah, like this scene in Candyman was like really big to me because of this, and like let's talk about the opening from It Follows, like let's talk about Salem's Lot. And like I just love it. Every Wednesday I am like so excited, and I like set time to just sit and watch the new installment of like what made the list.
I didn't know they were doing that. I have to, that's
There's two
definitely,
episodes out now, so
all right, then I need to binge those. But there's something about listening
mm-hmm.
and reading about people talking about these, cult moments that is so fascinating, and a lot of the time makes me see them with brand new goggles, a brand new lens, and not everything does that for me. Usually I'm not about reading behind the scenes. I don't really care about like what made the Ring of Power, magic. But when it comes to those like iconic moments, I'm like, I need to devour everything about this.
Yes. I think I just love hearing like cultural impact and like what is your personal experience with this? What did we think about this as a society at the time? And I think especially because like I don't have a ton of people in real life that like horror, so a lot of my like connecting to people about horror is done like this or like through Shutter. And so just hearing people talk about like them experiencing the same levels of terror and excitement and anxiety at the same scenes that I did, is kind of like getting to talk to someone about it. And it's
Yeah,
just
absolutely. I wrote an article about the the true story behind some of the biggest Hollywood moments. And one of those was the chestbuster scene in Alien, and how none of the actors knew what was happening that day. And they saw buckets of blood everywhere, and they were like, "What's that?" And everybody was like, "Don't worry about it. Like, just you do you, and we'll do us, and the buckets will be buckets." And knowing that like one of the characters was so scared that she passed out, just you have to run back to that scene and watch it. Like, I don't care if it's like in the middle of the workday, like, sorry boss, I just watched something and now I need to go rewatch this scene. And even learning, you might not remember that in the 2000s, in 1992, this thing like was a big deal, like by today's standards. Like, oh, the world wouldn't care about this, they wouldn't be offended by this. But then learning about like, no, 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 everybody was pretty mad or shocked that this happened, is something I am intensely invested in.
it is. I mean, I think I feel for the actress that passed out. I get it. Also, if someone tells me don't worry about it, guess what I'm going to do?
Doing the opposite.
I will worry about it. That is exactly what's going to happen to me. All right. Well, Sonja, thank you so much for coming on and talking to me about the much requested space horror topic.
It was so fun when I talk to my friends about horror or like space horror. They're like, yeah, 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 shut up. So this was this was a blast.
What's funny, my husband is very like, I would love to go to space. Like, I would absolutely go on a rocket and like go do this and come back. And I'm like, we are different breeds of people. And
Bon
like
voyage.
he is the person that's like excitedly showing me like the pictures and like, oh look, we have sounds from. I'm like, no, no.
Back out. Just write my name in your will, and that's where we will leave it.
So where can people find you online?
I am Ghostly Reads on TikTok and Spooky Curious on Twitter, Twitch, and Instagram.
All right. Well, again, thank you so much for coming on for this.
I will do it again.
Books in the Freezer is a bi-weekly podcast. We post episodes every other Tuesday. You can find us on Twitter at BooksFreezerPod or on TikTok and Instagram at Books in the Freezer. And you can send us an email at booksinthefreezer@gmail.com. If you would like to support the show, there are a few ways you can do that. One of them is to become a Patreon supporter at patreon.com/booksinthefreezer. There are 3 levels of support. There's like a $1, a $3, and a $5 level. So you can check that out and look at the different perks for each level and see if that sounds interesting to you. You can also check out the affiliate links on the show notes from sponsors like Fangoria, Libro FM, and the Amazon affiliate link there as well. There are, of course, ways to show your support for Books in the Freezer that do not involve spending any money. You can post on social media, whether it be posting about the new episodes or posting about the Books in the Freezer reading challenge. Anything like that is a huge help. Also, leaving reviews. On Spotify, I think it's been recently enabled that you can leave reviews, and you can just leave a star rating. You don't have to actually write a review. On Apple Podcasts, I think that option is there, but I think they prefer if you write an actual review with a title. And I mean, I like reading them. So thank you to those of you who have taken the time and done that already. I'm Stephanie. You can find me on Twitter at lady_Gagnon. That's LADY_GAGNON. And on Instagram at That's What She Read. And that is That's with 2 A's. And see you next time on Books in the Freezer.